18 BCE. Maybe often you can just blame it. Well, yeah, right. We fought against the Carthaginians in 3 of those Punic Wars, but it's all Juno's fault. I mean, blame it on the gods. At 3a, our relationship to other texts, and especially the Iliad and the Odyssey. Well, we've mentioned it already. The Iliad. In book 12 of the Iliad, we got Hector and his boulder. Notice that comment was made in the Iliad as well as by Virgil, that there was a time when men were strong enough to pick this stuff up, not like today. In other words, we're not as strong as we once were. That's the suggestion in both the Iliad as well as in the Aeneid. Right, we have Achilles versus Hector, no question the similarities there in book 22 of the Iliad. In the Odyssey, well, think about that one. At the very end of the Iliad and the Odyssey, we have the gods who are deciding in the end, it's enough. We've had enough with the slaughter and the fighting, right? Notice, remember at the end of the Odyssey, we're actually going to have civil war on Ithaca, right, because of all the killing of the suitors, and Athena will say, enough of it, I'm done with it. Well, what is your favorite text at 3a that will portray a fight scene that's similar to this? We asked the same question, didn't we, when we did Achilles and Hector and their fight scene. What is the film? I've had students that say, it's amazing that one of my favorite fight scenes in a movie plays this game very, very closely. Obviously, the people who made that fight scene know this fight scene, right? All right, let's do it. We said we were predicting it. Let's jump to 3b. I'm actually, though, not going to begin with the ending. That's where I'm going to end. I'm going to start, though, with this question about the role of women in the Aeneid and as well in all 3 of the books of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. The ways in which women are celebrated, we think immediately from the Aeneid of Camilla, and the ways in which they are not celebrated. The very teaching, it seems to be that women can be very, very divisive, and they're the cause of all of this. I mean, we're doing all this fighting because of Lavinia, or because of Helen, or because of, this kind of thing. What are your thoughts about that? Another question. Well, what do you think of Turnus? Before we get to Aeneas, what do you think of Turnus? I mean, he's an interesting kind of character, right? His name to even have the word turn in it. You do sense that there's kind of this turning at the end, and that Turnus is ready to say, okay, you got me, I'm done. We're calling this thing a day. And in the end, he remembers his daddy and he wants to go back home. Do you see him as heroic at the end? Of course, the real question is the question now that we will ask. Is Aeneas a hero? Or is he a villain? There's so much debate about this in terms of the scholarship. One side says Aeneas does not have a choice. What were the last words that we got from Evander? Make sure that the killer of my son is taken care of. Within the context of the poem, many have argued, not reading from outside the context, but within the context, you don't have a choice if you're Aeneas. You have to kill him. And he knows that, even though the mentioning of the father gives him second thought. And the fact that he gets to see Pallas's belt, well, that gives him justification, and so he takes the life. But he can't, I mean, there is no way he's going to be able to keep going without this killing, because Turnus, sooner or later, I mean, if he goes back to his father, we know that he has the ability to, of course, engender later on a possible war. And no question, Romans themselves will read this knowing the ways in which when you have 2, we think immediately of Julius Caesar and Pompey, or we think about Augustus and Mark Antony, Cleopatra. When you have 2 that are warring against each other, inevitably you're going to have chaos. So he doesn't have a choice. That's kind of one school of thought. The other school of thought says, no, this totally defies the idea expressed at the beginning of the poem, that Aeneas is a special new kind of hero because of his pietas. That is to say, his ability. Notice how the poem is constructed. He is ready to let the man off and say, let bygones be bygones, we'll figure this out. And then all of a sudden his fury takes over and he loses himself. This proves that he's not actually as heroic as Virgil would want him to be. If he was a true hero, he would be able to show clemency and mercy, and that would make him a more powerful leader king in the new union of the new kingdom to come. In other words, with the killing and the taking of life, all Aeneas has done is kick the can down the road. We're going to have more fighting. For example, Lavinia will probably resent Aeneas for killing her would-be lover husband, the one she blushed in front of, right? Well, you get to decide, guys, and that's why I love these poems, because they do challenge you. That is the end of our study of the Aeneid, and as well, our 3 great epic poems. These are the 3 foundational poems, many have argued, of Western civilization. Now, in one final lecture, before we move on in our AP study to other texts, I want us to spend a little bit of time asking about now these 3 poems together. And I'm going to ask that we think about these poems from three perspectives. We want to see these poems as great poems of poetic genius, no question. All three poems as instructional, didactic. I've been using this term propedeutic. And finally, disturbing. No question. The implications of all three of these poems. What if you built a society or a civilization around the ideas that are presented in the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid? What would that civilization look like? Come back and we'll maybe have that conversation and get ready for the rest of our AP study. Thank you. I very much enjoyed the study with you.